name is Steven Snow, and this is my first signing ever. I love Spider-Man and all the characters in it, and I thought Spider-Gwen was a fascinating character that they created.
It's people really can't wait to get back into Gwen, no pun intended. So, and it's good to have her back, and I thought this was a perfect loophole to see her.
Everyone out there, this is your host JR at Metal Machine Video on metalmachine.net. We're here in New York City at Midtown Comics with Jason Latour, currently on Spider-Gwen. Jason, what's going on? What's happening? How are you braving this cold?
I'm being very cautious.
I heard you talking to some of the fans that were here for the writing, for the signing, that you're from the South, so you were braving the cold here in New York, right?
Yeah, I lived up here for a little while, and I lived here for like 2 years, and I loved it, but I still have never gotten used to it being really cold.
Hey, I'm a New Yorker, and I can't get used to the cold.
Yeah, I mean, it does get cold at home, but like it doesn't. I think there's sort of wind tunnel effect,
right,
that you don't get in other places. The people who haven't spent any time here don't realize that.
I hear you. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you definitely got us at the nice cold time for sure.
Yeah, maybe the coldest time in history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So much for no climate change, right? Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Spider-Gwen, Marvel Comics. There's so much hoopla over this book. It just came out this week, and you just had about over 200 people come in for this signing. How was that?
Oh, it was amazing. It's hard to wrap my head around it. I'm really flattered by it, though. It's really, you could work your whole career and not sign 200 books. Right. So to do it all in one sitting is really a little gratifying and really humbling, also in a way. So I'm just really grateful that everybody enjoyed it enough to come out and stand in the cold.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we've got Spider-Gwen now. You're going to be working on this book for a bit. What can you tell us? What can you tell the fans what might be coming up in the next couple of issues of this book while you're handling this character?
Well, the big thing that we're sort of dealing with, sort of the through line of all of this, is Gwen is really sort of in an existential crossroads as a character, where she's trying to figure out how to be Gwen Stacy and Spider-Woman at the same time. There's really sort of growing pains here, and that's not. A lot of that is born out of in her first appearance, she reveals herself to her father, thinking that this is going to solve her problem in a way, to stand up and take culpability for the things that people think, to try and control the narrative, to try and tell her own story. But the problem is that the rest of the world doesn't know or have any evidence that there's a different side to the story.
Right.
So her actions as Spider-Woman are going to sort of revolve around trying to be she came out of Spider-Verse with all these other Spider folks that are all heroes, and she comes back to her universe where she's a criminal.
Right.
And so she's really driven to be and prove that she's as heroic as the other Spider characters. And the real crisis at the crux of the heart of the book is that that's a really hard thing to get your arms around. So it is almost going to seem like being Gwen Stacy and Spider-Woman are two things that maybe can't coexist. So all the threats and the sort of the things we'll be playing with and setting against her in this first couple arcs will deal with that. So in the first arc, her father is on her side now, but unfortunately the people he works for aren't.
Right.
So we see in that first issue that Frank Castle is now in charge of hunting Spider-Woman. And then on the personal front, she really wants to be in the Mary Janes and wants to have a life as Gwen Stacy, but how can she commit to this thing that she loves with her friends and still, pop off and be Spider-Woman?
Right.
Because she has commitment with that band that she has to fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
and she can't tell them the truth. She can't say, Mary Jane, I do take this seriously.
Right.
So I think those two things will be a lot of fun to play against each other.
It's almost a little parallel in the whole Peter Parker world, where he always had to have a little bit of dichotomy with, being Spider-Man and Peter Parker at the same time.
Yeah, I think the common thread is that the book, I definitely don't want this book to feel like just girl Peter Parker,
right.
But I do think there's a commonality where Peter Parker and Spider-Man sort of redefined what superheroes are.
Right.
He's kind of the main character that, if you look back at the history of comics, like Superman never had problems as Clark Kent.
Right.
Batman rarely had problems as Bruce Wayne. Characters that predated Spider-Man didn't have sort of the divide between their lives as heroes and civilians. And so that's really more of what I think the commonality is that just an effort to not make it like Peter Parker Spider-Man, but make it the root of the things that he introduced into superhero comics.
Sure. This book seems to be leading the charge right now with Marvel Comics in a female way, with women characters, being the headliners of their books. You've got Miss Marvel, and you got Black Widow, which has been there for a while, but this is definitely heading into new terrain. How do you feel about that?
Well, we definitely wouldn't be here without Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, all the other great books, Black Widow and
right.
Hawkeyes of the world.
Sure.
Like these books have sort of set the table for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that I feel like we're leading the way, but it is nice to be like involved and at the table, and have an opportunity to do these kinds of books, not just because they're aimed at a specific gender, because I don't really sit down to do it that
Sure.
way, to try and tell a story that anybody can
Right.
enjoy. But also, aesthetically, the books seem to be driven by, the things that I think make good comics, which is a combination of writing and art, Like this book, I'm the first to admit that I think a lot of the success of this book is that my art team, Robbie and Rico are great.
Right.
And not just great, but like also on the same page. And I think if you look at the commonality of books like Miss Marvel and all those books that I mentioned earlier,
mm-hmm.
they all sort of have that in common. There's a good fusion of writing and art, as well as an eye towards shaking things up and doing things that we haven't seen.
So give us a brief history. How did you break into comic books? How did you get into
I don't know if there is
a
a brief history.
That's a story for another time. Well, let's say this. Let's say up and coming writers. What would you? What kind of advice would you give them to break into the big times or into the genre itself?
Somebody, I keep wearing this one out because somebody told me this not long ago that breaking into comics is a lot like when breaking out of prison. As soon as somebody does it, the hole is sealed up.
Right.
So I don't think my experiences are particularly germane to anybody else's.
Right.
But what I do think is important to do, like whether you want to be an artist or a writer, is to make yourself a part of the community. Attend conventions, not so much with the thought of Marvel's going to hire me at this show, but in terms of who can I talk to and start to form relationships with, genuine relationships with, find people that have the similar interests to you. And if you're an artist or a writer, try and find people that you get on the same page with, who will support you and push you, and it's like networking in a genuine way. I think don't look at networking as if you're going to find a guy that's going to hire you and get you the next job, but think about who enjoys the same work that I want to do. I just feel like that is ultimately going to propel you forward in a way that looking at it like handing somebody your resume won't. I think that's the one thing I've noticed in the people I've known that have broken in.
Mm-hmm.
So that maybe is
one way of doing it,
that maybe is not that maybe doesn't sound like good advice,
right.
But it's definitely my philosophical approach to it.
So you're on Spider-Gwen right now, and you've had some heavy hitters in there in the past. Daredevil and Wolverine. Is there anybody in the Marvel universe that you're like itching to maybe grab onto and really tackle?
That's tough, man. I went by the Marvel offices today, and I was sort of telling the guys like, I grew up. I read a lot of Marvel comics, but I also read the handbooks backwards and forwards.
Right.
So a lot of my love and knowledge of this stuff comes from sort of like reading summaries of the story. So I'm in love with a lot of characters.
Right.
I tend to gravitate towards. It would depend, Like I do definitely want to do a Hulk thing one day. I just like drawing that character. Daredevil's a big favorite of mine. But I also don't want to paint myself in a corner with that stuff, because I think what's interesting about comics these days and where you get a lot of really good work is by creators that sort of say they're going to create their own take on a character. Take a character that people maybe have never had appreciation for and push it into a new arena. So I'm always open to. I never know when I'm going to wake up with an idea for something.
Sure. Lastly, what would you like to tell the fans out there?
I just thank you.
And there were a bunch of them here today at Midtown Comics, right?
Yeah. I mean, really, thank you. I feel like this is very unprecedented sort of territory to have fans really vote for a book like this. Right. With their wallet and their enthusiasm and all the support online. And I don't know, man. It's been really, really surreal and amazing at the same time.
Jason Latour, Marvel Comics, Spider-Gwen #1 and number 2, 3, 4, and who knows, right? And get your copies now, Midtown Comics.
Gwenfinity.
Gwenfinity, right? Thank you so much. Continued success. Appreciate it.
Man.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Jason Latour is here. I'm very excited to meet him. I saw him at Comic-Con when the news was released that Spider-Gwen was going to be a series, and I'm very excited to be here. Though it's really, I was so excited when I picked up the copy. I go to Comic-Con and anime conventions as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.